May 18th, 1980 was supposed to be a normal day for you. You woke up early, rushed to get some breakfast, put on your uniform, and headed out the door to work. You don't have a normal job though. You're part of an elite military unit based out of Fort Lewis, Washington. You're an Army Ranger, and you have no idea how much your life is about to change. For the past month, U.S. Geological Survey scientists have been keeping a close eye on Mount St. Helens after a small-scale eruption had occurred on March 27th. Things were looking like they could turn serious in a heartbeat. Locals in the potential danger zone were evacuated, roadblocks were set up, and everyone was warned that something catastrophic was very likely to happen. It was just a matter of time. The whole area was on standby for one of the most impressive and apocalyptic sights the world had ever seen. In the areas closely surrounding the mountain, the flora and fauna are unsuspecting. They're just part of nature carrying out their everyday existence and ongoing quest for survival. Deer, elk, bears, wolves, they're all unaware of the impending disaster. But one creature is different, one that holds a level of intelligence that is unrivaled in the animal kingdom. Some would argue that it's not even an animal, it's a being of some sort, one that walks upright on 2 feet. The legendary Bigfoot, or Sasquatch. For decades, stories and rumors of these bizarre creatures had been circulating, and there were indeed many believers. One of the most famous Bigfoot tales was that of the attack at Ape Canyon that occurred back in 1924, right in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. A group of gold prospectors came under attack by these Bigfoot creatures and were bombarded with large, heavy rocks and boulders. This happened right there at Mount St. Helens and became one of the most famous Bigfoot stories ever told. Were these Bigfoot beings in the same danger as the rest of the wildlife? Could they sense what was about to happen? You were about to find out. Just after 8:30 a.m., your unit gets word that Mount St. Helens had finally erupted, but you didn't really need to be told. In the distance, you can see the massive column of ash billowing high into the sky, and you felt the tremors. It isn't long before the National Guard is deployed to assist in the recovery effort. The area is incredibly unstable for a while after the eruption. People need to be rescued, not just from the eruption, but also from the mudslides that have been destroying everything in their path. The situation is dire, and you wonder, will you be sent out to assist? After about a week or so, you get the call. You are to be deployed to a disaster-forward area to assist with special asset recovery. What exactly does that mean, you wonder? You don't get much information, and on the way out to your area of operations, your imagination is going wild. This is the day that Bigfoot becomes a very real thing to you. Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Mount St. Helens, the eruption, and the rumored Bigfoot bodies that were apparently recovered from the area back in 1980 in the month of May. Now, we've talked about the story multiple times on Mountain Beast Mysteries. I've shared my thoughts with it. You guys kind of know what I think. I was really on the fence. There's a lot of things about the story that are very fantastic and, would make a really, really great legend, a great tale. And it really is, out there as far as Bigfoot stories go. It really is fantastic. But there are lots of articles online that you can come across that, tell different versions of the story. There's one main story that involves military units recovering these bodies, they're getting called in. In most of the stories, you'll hear that it's the National Guard, members of the National Guard, and they get called in to find these Bigfoot bodies and to assist in their recovery. Which is crazy. Weeks ago, before Christmas, I ended up getting an email from a guy who claimed to have been in this group of Army guys that was actually there, part of this recovery group who went to find these Bigfoot bodies. So in the original story, you'll hear of these National Guardsmen who go out to this location near Mount St. Helens. There's a little temporary military base set up, and there's some characters. There's usually a commander. There's always the guy in the trench coat or the lab coat. You'll hear of this guy in all the stories. And basically, these army guys would follow these guys to this cave or whatever, and they would bring out these Bigfoot bodies. Some of them would be wounded, some of them would be dead, others would be alive. There's one Sasquatch who's the leader, and he's alive and working with, the commander and this guy in the lab coat who is some sort of doctor. But yeah, they go to the cave, they find these wounded Bigfoot, these bodies, and they carry them out and they do whatever with them. You'll hear in one of the stories that at the military camp, there was like a tarp or something covering a big pile of animal corpses. Well, it's revealed later in the story that they're actually Bigfoot corpses. Seems pretty crazy. If this story's true, the government has known about the Sasquatch there for a long time. This isn't the first encounter. They must have, realized Mount St. Helens was erupting. We have to go save these Bigfoot creatures and get them out of there. I don't know. It's just, the whole story seems so crazy to me. It does seem like something somebody made up. And I can't help that. That's just how I feel about it, because it is so crazy. But anyways, the guy who emailed me, he sent me a description of what happened in his own words. And it is more detailed than usual. The biggest difference that I could see in the story is that when he explains it, he's not part of the National Guard. So I don't know if whoever told the story first, somebody apparently came out on the internet back in 2012 and told the story, claiming that he was part of a group of National Guardsmen who were out there. But this guy, it's clear that they're the same story. Like, he's part of the same group, but this guy says he was an Army Ranger. So I don't know if, the people who were there were actually Army Rangers, and when the story initially came out, whoever told it said they were National Guard to try and cover it up. I have no idea. Also, the last time I talked about the story, I said it's really weird how they just got some random National Guardsmen to come help with this. Why wouldn't they get anybody from a different unit, somebody more elite, someone more secretive, Yeah, I feel like if this was actually a Sasquatch body recovery mission, they would do that, right? If they're trying to keep it secret and cover it up. So I wonder if this guy wrote in and he changed the story. He heard my last video, heard me say that, and changed the story to make it make more sense. I don't know. It could be anything. This could be, completely made up. There's a chance it could be real. I don't know. But anyways, I'm going to get into this guy's email right now. You guys can listen to it and you can compare it to the original story. If you haven't heard the original story, Google it after. It's really easy to come by and you can compare the two. And I'm going to get into it more in just a little bit, but first I wanted to actually share this email with you guys. This story has only been told once before, and that was to my wife, who was to become part of the story and a witness to the truth. I will not use any names or exact locations because I don't want those people who witnessed these events harassed. Part of the story has been told by several other people through the years, and as our stories are mostly about the same event, the difference between theirs and mine is that my story has a second part and a more personal interaction. In 1980, I was stationed with the U.S. Army at Fort Lewis in Washington State. My MOS was 11 Bravo 1 Victor. If you have any Army background, this might tell you what I did. During my time there, the U.S. had one of the worst natural disasters the country has ever seen. That was the eruption of Mount St. Helens. At the time of the disaster, I was part of one of the U.S. Army's Advanced Warfare Specialist Battalions. That's not the real name they went by. Elements from Fort Lewis were assigned to help in all aspects of the recovery effort. At first, we were not involved as they just needed support units, medical, MP types, supply, transport, and the like. About a week or so after the disaster, we were approached by our company commander and told we would be deploying to a disaster-forward recovery area. We would be assisting with restricted area security and special projects asset protection, and would be supporting a U.S. Air Force Special Security detail coming from somewhere on Vancouver Island in Canada. They were to be deployed within a couple of days. Our orders were to provide special protection to a temporary medical facility operated by the U.S. Forestry Service and the Combined Service Medical Support Detachment Foxtrot. We packed up and deployed to our assigned area of operations, which was about 2.5 hours past any manned or recognized civilian area and deep in the middle of nowhere. Along the way, we were told that the area we would be operating in was being used to store and destroy animal carcasses killed in the disaster, and there were thousands of these carcasses of every type: deer, bear, everything. We went on past that area for about 4 or 5 miles. We arrived at this area at about 1700 hours, and we were greeted by a man wearing a white medical coat and what I would say was his assistant. Our company commander, Captain X, walked up to them and reported. The area was made up of several general-purpose large tents, several medium tents, and military and DOF vehicles of all kinds. The area was referred to as the Special Projects Medical Asset Facility. The two men then explained that we would be serving as deep perimeter security for the facility, as well as facility asset security for special guests. He explained that they had a detail of U.S. Air Force SSP Special Security Police that would be providing security in the command area while we maintained an active protection line about a half-mile outside the command center. We were given the grid location to our area where we set up several communications and listening posts with direct lines to the command tent. We had orders not to allow intruders to infiltrate the AO. We were to detain and turn over any non-authorized personnel to the command staff. We were authorized, standard rules of engagement, to return fire in the protection of ourselves or the assets at the command facility. We couldn't imagine where that would be an issue. We were also ordered to conduct walking patrols day and night every day for the term of our deployment. None of us had any idea why we were there or what was going on until on or around day 6. My company commander, Captain X, and the man in the white coat came up to us and requested we accompany them on a medical extraction. We were relieved from our security duties and followed them back to the compound. Upon arriving at the compound, we were instructed to follow a caravan of military vehicles. There were 2 M151A1 Jeeps and 2 M35 deuce-and-a-half trucks. We drove for about 2 hours through some of the roughest terrain I'd ever seen, and at the end of the drive we came up to the base of a rocky outcropping and a path that would lead to a cave. Upon arriving, the man in the coat, who ended up being a doctor from the Department of Forestry, and our company commander, Captain X, told us to provide security and assist when needed. They then walked over to one of the deuce-and-a-halfs and helped what I would say was one of the biggest men I had ever seen. They stood there for a couple of minutes talking, or what looked like talking. I couldn't hear what was being said. It did look as if they all understood each other. This man had to be 8 feet tall, at least 800 pounds, and as wide as the Jeep we were standing next to. He was wearing a dark coat that didn't really fit. It was much too small. We watched him get closer and closer, and when we got to within 10 feet or so, it was very easy to see that he was no man, but an older male Sasquatch. I had never seen anything like this. My partner and I looked at each other with confused bewilderment. He was huge and had massive hands and deep dark eyes. He was dark brown and kind of reddish, with hair everywhere about 3 to 4 inches long, except at the top part of his face, which was dark and leathery, with a 5 to 6 inch scar on the right side. This will become important later on in this story. One thing you always hear is that they smell really bad. Well, they don't. They do smell sort of like a wet, dirty dog. It reminds me of my own German Shepherds when they didn't have a bath for a while. It wasn't really bad, just different. I can't say that this is the case for all of them, or if this one had a bath or something, I don't know, but it wasn't a bad smell. There was no way you would ever want to fight against this guy. He was literally a walking mountain. One thing that I found strange was that I didn't feel in danger at all. He had a look of concern and worry on his face. We all followed the Sasquatch, the doctor, and our company commander about 25 yards up this rough trail when he stopped and let out this unearthly yell or roar. I'm not sure how to put it, but it was the kind of sound that would reach down inside of you and turn you inside out. There were no responses, so we continued up the trail to the mouth of this cave. Our commander told us to stay outside and provide security. The rest of the team went inside carrying different types of medical equipment and a medical litter or stretcher. They were inside the cave for about 30 minutes. Every now and then we could hear some loud, non-human noises coming from inside the cave, but we couldn't understand what it was. After the 30 minutes was up, 6 of what I would assume were medics or medical support personnel came out carrying a stretcher with the body of a female Sasquatch who was deceased from what I would say was extreme third-degree burns. As I looked at her, I got this massive wave of sadness. It hit me hard and reminded me of the many times I lost one of my German Shepherds. I looked over to my partner and he too was having a hard time with it. I, without realizing it, reached out and touched her hand as they carried her by. It was warm and very soft. It was also large and made mine look small. As they walked by with the entire team, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It seemed to be the touch of comforting and support, one that made me feel like everything was okay. My partner then took a step back and had a surprised look on his face. I looked at the hand and then up to the face of the massive male Sasquatch. He looked at me with deep sadness in his eyes, and what I would say was respect for me, and an offer of understanding and gratitude. He then walked down the trail by her side and reached out to grab her hand as a last gesture of love. When we got to the back of the deuce and a half with the female, which I would say was his mate, they placed her in the back and he climbed inside next to her. I don't care what anyone says, these creatures are not animals in the sense of killers. They without a doubt are just like us. We drove back to the camp to continue with our duties, but just before my partner and I walked away, 2 Air Force SSPs walked over to us and one of them said, "So what do you think of that?" I replied with, "What?" He said, "You know, that monster thing." My partner replied, "I didn't see any monsters." Looking at me, he said, "Did you?" I said, "No." That airman walked off and the other airman told us that he went out on several other trips to bring back wounded assets. He said some made it and some didn't, and it seemed like it was some kind of troop of them, and the one that went with us was the leader. He also said that he was part of a special program and was known by the government for many years, and that the doctor was their handler or manager or something. He then walked off too. We were there for another couple of days, and then we returned to our company area at Fort Lewis. I always wondered why they picked us for this duty, then it became obvious. Our MOS was one of extreme tactical awareness and capabilities, and the top secret clearance didn't hurt. The story doesn't end there though, it gets much better. So what do you guys think about that? You'll notice at the end it's kind of like a cliffhanger because there is a second part, and the second part makes the story sound even crazier, which is why I'm super suspicious, because the part that we're going to get into next almost seems like, I don't know, like a really bad cheesy movie or something, you know, because it's so unbelievable that this would happen. Not saying it's impossible, I guess it's possible, but to me when I read it I'm like, this is a stretch. This is a big stretch. But yeah, the main differences I noticed in that story was that it's not a group of National Guardsmen. I don't know if there was guardsmen there as well, and these ranger guys. I have no idea. It's not mentioned. I'm sure the gentleman who wrote the email will watch this video and provide more details on that, hopefully. But with this story, I do want your guys' help. If you have any questions that you want me to ask this guy, let me know in the comments, because this is a perfect opportunity to, you know, collectively investigate this story. You know, this is one, like I said, that I never thought I would ever hear about from anyone. It's one of the most famous Bigfoot stories that you'll find online, one of the most fascinating and I guess far-fetched stories. So down in the comments, post your questions. I'll pick a bunch of them and I'll send them to this guy in an email, and we'll see what he says. You know, obviously anybody can make up anything. If we send a bunch of questions, you know, you can just make up answers, but I want to see what we get back. I want to see if we can stump this guy, because I am suspicious. It's kind of like that Columbus Day Bigfoot body story I covered years ago. I think it was in 1962, stories of the Bigfoot body, the wounded Bigfoot, or I can't even remember what it was, that was found after the Columbus Day storm. And I guess some scientists or whatever got a hold of the body, and it was a really fantastic story. But after further investigation, I found out that it was made up. And it took a while of like poking around and digging around for information, and there was lots of people involved in the investigation of that story. There were people sending me information who didn't know it was fake, and it was really hard to navigate, you know. This story kind of reminds me of that. It's also a more personal story too, like the part where he says he touched the Bigfoot's hand, you know, and they talk about like they're loving creatures and just stuff like that. Just seems kind of weird, you know. I don't know how else to put it. It's a very unique story in that sense that it's very personal and like, I don't know, it's cheesy. It's kind of cheesy. And I feel like if I feel like if a army unit was to go do this secret mission and recover these bodies, I feel like they wouldn't like tell the truth to a random guy on YouTube, to be honest. Like if there were actual serious secrets and you swore an oath or whatever, I find it very unbelievable that somebody who was actually there and involved with this would just send the information to a guy on YouTube. You know what I mean? That's why I'm leaning towards it not being a real story, because I feel like if this actually happened, I feel like it wouldn't even be like an army ranger there. I feel like it would be way higher up than that. I feel like it would be a unit that you probably would have never even heard of. I feel like they would have other resources that were way more secretive. But, I guess I could be wrong. I don't really know how things work in the military, to be honest. I was never in the military. I don't know much about it, especially in the US. So if you guys have any information, let me know, because I am uneducated on that subject. But anyways, let's get into part 2 of the story. This is the really strange part. If you didn't think it could get any stranger, it's about to. So let's have a listen. Several months later, my new wife and I were headed out of Fort Lewis up into the mountains to meet some friends from my unit for a weekend of rest and beer drinking. We were heading down one of the more popular highways that led into the mountains and some of our favorite cabin areas. It was snowing pretty good by the time we hit the pass and had to slow down to about 35 miles per hour. It was really getting hard to see and the traffic was crazy. We were just talking about anything and everything when I looked forward and seen a truck headed right towards us. It was on our side of the road and not aware that we were there. With the mountain on our right side, I swerved to my left, which wasn't a great choice either, as it was about 150 to 200 feet down to the bottom of this valley where there was a very active river. It wasn't straight down, but it was a steep drop with a lot of trees and underbrush and an ice-cold river waiting at the bottom. That's what happened. We crashed through the barrier and rolled over several times and eventually landed upside down, half in the water. I was hurting bad, and my wife was unconscious and bleeding from her ears and nose. The roof of our car was about 12 inches closer to us, and I could smell gas. I tried to unhook my seatbelt, but couldn't reach it. I tried to waken my wife, but I had no luck there either. It wasn't even me that I was worried about, it was my wife. She looked so innocent and helpless, and I promised to keep her safe, and I couldn't. I struggled in every way I could, but no luck. I remembered I had my M9 knife in my glove compartment, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reach it. I thought it was over. I started talking to God. I couldn't believe this was how my story was going to end. Just as I was coming to the thought that there was nothing more I could do and seeing that we were sliding more into the river, the current was pushing us, I started feeling very lightheaded from the pain and loss of blood, thinking I couldn't last much longer without help. I then saw out of the corner of my right eye a figure that I couldn't really make out, trying to get in the car from my wife's side. After a couple of minutes and with no success, whoever it was went away. It's now that the fear set in because they gave up and it was getting worse. The water was now filling up the car and I knew we had about 2 minutes at best. It was then I saw a huge hand reach through my window and grab a hold of the door. Just as I passed out, I saw the door ripped off the car and tossed into the river. When I came to, my wife and I were leaning against a tree, wondering what had happened. I grabbed my wife and checked her over. She was bad, but speaking to me. I looked at her face and saw fear. No, more like horror. I looked into the area she was and I saw them. It was 2 massive Sasquatches. One was older and bigger, but the other wasn't too far behind. It did look young and female. They didn't frighten me. It kind of made me feel like back at Mount St. Helens. Then I noticed as they got closer, the bigger one had a scar on the side of his face about 5 to 6 inches long. It was the big guy from the cave. I could tell he recognized me as he knelt and put his enormous hand on my wife's knee. She just looked at me and I said, "It's okay, he's my friend." She said, "What?" I said, "I'll explain later." By this time we could hear people arriving up on the road and efforts being made to come down and rescue us. I tried to get up but I couldn't. I later found out I had a broken pelvic bone, a broken leg, 4 broken ribs, and a broken collarbone, and I was just beat up. My wife had a crushed pelvis, a broken shoulder, a concussion, and a dislocated knee. He stood up and looked at us with the same look I gave him back at the cave. I then said thanks, and he reached out and put his hand on my shoulder again. This time I touched his hand and just shook my head in disbelief. I couldn't believe how this massive being could take his time to stop and help, knowing that he, by helping, was risking his and the others' lives. I told them that they had to go. I didn't want any issues with the rescuers trying to hurt them, not that they could have, or even seeing them. The young female was touching this ribbon that was in my wife's hair. It seemed to amuse her. My wife untied it and removed it from her bloody hair and handed it to her. She took it, and it looked like she tried to put it in her hair as they walked away. That was the last time I saw my friend. I know you're all asking your friend, well, maybe not in the sense that we are used to, but in the way that I wish we the people would be, caring and being there for whoever needed us. The rescuers had a lot of questions on how we got out of the car and how we ended up by the tree, given how serious our injuries were. Let's just say they had more questions than they had answers. After a couple of months, when my wife and I were released from the hospital, I told her everything. She believed every word and told me how lucky I was to have someone look over me when I needed it the most. I'm telling this story now because I've heard so many stories about the Mount St. Helens Bigfoot findings and hear so many people saying how they were all full of crap. Well, I'm here to say that they were not. It happened and they are real. I don't know about all of them, but the ones I saw and interacted with were not mean killers. That's not to say that they couldn't if provoked. I wouldn't want to mess with any of them. They are massive and dangerous if they wanted to be. I never went back looking and never really wanted to. They need to be left alone. I do from time to time wonder how he's doing, how they're all doing. Also, they're not interdimensional. They are flesh and blood. They live and they die. I saw it, and I saw them die. They die just like us, and they live just like us. I've never seen them laugh, but I'm sure they do. I did see this massive beast cry at the loss of his mate, and I saw them happy just by helping someone and getting a simple thing like a hair ribbon. As Forrest Gump so eloquently said, that's all I have to say about that. We don't care if anyone believes this or not, as we know it's true. Thanks for reading, Mr. and Mrs. M. So I'm sure you guys can see how that is very unlikely to be a thing that happened. Like, what are the odds of that? The one time you're out and you get in a car accident, you end up running into the exact same Sasquatch that, you assisted back during the eruption. Right place at the right time, same creature, was there exactly when you needed it the most. That's why this story sounds like a cheesy movie, like I said before. It just sounds like something made up. And it's not impossible, highly, highly, highly improbable. And kind of like I said, it's just like very personal and weird. Like the female Sasquatch taking the bow from the hair and like trying to put it in her hair and talking about like the love and like I'm an emotional, like sensitive guy, but this is pretty cheesy to me. And I don't want to make fun of the story because it could be true, but I have a hard time believing in it, and I do need a lot more information. So I'm hoping to get that. And like I said before, I need your guys' help with those questions. And it'll be interesting to see what we get back, I was thinking that maybe this guy got in a car accident and, maybe was like knocked unconscious or whatever and dreamt this. But then if his wife experienced it too, that wouldn't really make sense. At this point, I really don't know what to believe. I am leaning towards it being all made up, but every now and then you get a really interesting email that kind of opens up, more aspects of the story. Now, it's pretty much the same story. There's a few more details, and some of them are different, which is like why is the male Sasquatch wearing a jacket and the rest of them aren't? I don't know. Maybe to identify him as a leader for all the people around. That's the closest explanation I could come up with in my mind. It seems weird to me, when you hear these stories and it involves the military and it involves keeping quiet. It's weird that these people are just told, yeah, you never saw this, don't talk about this ever, and that's that. Like, yeah, don't talk about it, we're good here, you didn't see anything, nothing ever happened. Okay, cool. It just seems, I feel like there would be more to that conversation, I feel like there would be maybe not papers signed, because then there's evidence that something happened, but it just seems kind of silly that they would just say, don't talk about this, and then leave it at that, and then trust them. I don't know. Seems weird to me. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I don't really know what else to say at this point. until we get more information. So hopefully we'll get that soon. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching this video. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.